It's time for Recipe of the Day. If you listened to my conversation with my mom from a couple of weeks ago, you know that I need to make and then photograph her coleslaw recipe. Since I recorded that interview with her, she has made that coleslaw for me and it is so good. I love it. I cannot wait to get that recipe up on Cook the Story for you. But until then, I feel like I should share my second favorite coleslaw recipe. This one is a coleslaw that I created specifically to pair with pulled pork. So this is a great coleslaw to serve alongside pulled pork or in pulled pork sandwiches or in pulled pork tacos. That is my favorite use for this. Now, why is this coleslaw so great for pulled pork? I think there are three reasons. First of all, there are two main kinds of coleslaw. There is a more like vinaigrette dressing kind of coleslaw. This one has usually like a clear dressing and is quite acidic versus a creamy coleslaw, which often has mayonnaise as a base. Now, I find that the sauce on pulled pork already has quite a bit of acidity, and so we don't need the more acidic coleslaw. Instead, something creamy to balance some of that acidity is perfect. The second thing is there's quite a bit of garlic powder in this coleslaw. You could grate fresh garlic in there if you wanted as well, but there's quite a bit of garlic in there. And I usually put lots of garlic in my pulled pork. There's usually garlic in whatever barbecue sauce people are using. And so it really marries those two together. And similarly, the sugar used in this coleslaw dressing is brown sugar. And it might just sound like a silly little difference, white sugar versus brown sugar, but it really does make it just a tiny bit rounder flavor and taste so good with that sauce on that pulled pork, which also often has brown sugar in it, right? So that is why I love this coleslaw with pulled pork. Okay, how do you make it? First, mix up the dressing. This one is a half cup of mayonnaise, 2 tablespoons of that brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of just plain old white vinegar, a half teaspoon of garlic powder, and a half teaspoon of salt. Mix that well and set it aside. Then you're getting your cabbage. Now, if I'm getting my own heads of cabbage to do this, then I quite like to use green and purple cabbage, half of a head of each one, and then you get that really nice green and purple color. Very, very colorful coleslaw. What do you do with the other half heads of cabbages that you end up with? You need to go listen to that conversation with my mom from a couple weeks ago that I mentioned, because she talks about several uses for cabbage and explains why she always has a head of cabbage in her fridge. But if you do not want to have extra cabbage in your fridge after making this, you can just use a small head of one color. Either one's going to be fine. Or you can buy a 16-ounce bag of shredded cabbage, which is sometimes called coleslaw mix. Sometimes it has carrots in it. Sometimes it does not, which leads me to my next ingredient, which is 2 large carrots grated. So you get 2 large carrots, you peel them, and then you grate them on the cheese grater, or you can buy them already shredded carrots, julienne carrots, or like I said, if you buy that bag of shredded cabbage, sometimes it already has carrots in there, and then you don't need to do anything with carrots. Okay, as to that cabbage, backing up, if you have cabbage that is a head of cabbage, not the purchased shredded bag of cabbage, you need to shred it yourself. The easiest way to do that is to cut the head of cabbage in half and then use a knife to take out the core. It's going to be like a triangular part that you can see in there. Cut that out and then put the cabbage flat side down and thinly slice it with your knife. Then put your shredded cabbage into a big bowl with those carrots and add that dressing and stir it, and then you can serve it immediately or refrigerate covered for 1 day and then serve. Now, if you are planning to keep it for longer than that, you might actually want to do a step before making the coleslaw, which helps to take some of the liquid out of the cabbage, which makes it less likely to end up kind of watery after it's sat in the fridge for a couple of days. What you do is put your cabbage into a bowl before you've added any dressing or anything to it. So your shredded cabbage in a bowl, sprinkle a teaspoon of salt on it, stir it around, and then leave it for 30 minutes. That's going to draw out some of the water. So you can then drain away any water that accumulates in the bottom of the bowl and pat dry the cabbage that you have, and then less liquid is going to come out of it later. The only thing you need to be aware of is when you make your dressing for this coleslaw, don't put any salt in it because you already salted that cabbage. But what you're going to do is after you mix the dressing together with the cabbage, give it a good stir and then taste it, and you might need to add some salt. The reason that I don't know is because we don't know how much of that salt that you added at the beginning gets sort of washed away in the liquid that comes out. And so it's best to do that salting step and then make your dressing without salt, and then taste the whole thing and see if it needs salt or not at the end. See what I mean? Now, if you haven't done that salting step at the beginning and you have some coleslaw in your fridge that's there for a couple of days, it's still good. You're just going to see that there's like liquidy, white liquidy dressing at the bottom of the bowl. What I do is to take a big pair of tongs and stir the whole thing up, and then get a second bowl, so not the one that your coleslaw is currently in, and use those tongs to transfer the coleslaw to the new bowl, kind of shaking any excess liquid off into the first bowl as you go. So that way we've stirred the dressing back into the slaw, we're getting most of the flavor, and then we're shaking off some of that excess liquid. See? Okay, that is how I make the greatest coleslaw to have with pulled pork. You need to make some pulled pork now and then pile it into those tacos with this slaw. You're going to love it. I just know it. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there, or find it in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. And hey, just a quick note. I'm on a recording hiatus right now, so for the next little while, I'm replaying episodes from the archives, including this one. If you heard me mention a holiday, a season, or something going on in my life that seemed a bit off, that's why. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying these older episodes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.